The World Trade Organization, not surprisingly or unsurprisingly, says it expects trade to plummet. The markets, having heard both of these pieces of data, took a sharp turn lower, particularly as Jerome Powell began to speak. He said the Fed did not anticipate the scale of President Trump's trade war.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth.
We will factor in what the chair said in just a moment, because the other piece of news that we got was the WTO, the World Trade Organization, based in Geneva, and the WTO's warning global trade is going to take a major hit. Again, you might arguably say, tell me something that you didn't realize. But the significance is the trade of goods is expected to contract by 0.5% this year in an industry or an area that is normally constantly growing, bringing middle class and poorer developed nations out of poverty. Previously, growth in world trade was projected to expand nearly 3% before the tariffs. And now the WTO says the war is going to damage the global economy. Growth projected to come in at 2.2% this year. That would have been much higher without the tariffs. And the WTO is warning its projections could get even worse if escalation continues and it deteriorates. So with me, the Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the DG of the World Trade Organization, who's going to tell us about the uncertainty and the brake on global growth. Joining me from Geneva. Director General, thank you. The reality is now coming home to roost. The numbers are awful, and to some extent these are really just, to some extent, preliminary guesswork on a level of uncertainty that's unparalleled. Would you agree?
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. Today, we, as you said, we released our forecasts. And when we look at trade policies currently in effect, including the pause, we do project that global merchandise trade volumes will decline by about 0.2%, as you said, in 2025. This is nearly 3 percentage points below the level we would have expected without recent trade policy shifts. But there are two downside risks. If we reinstate reciprocal tariffs, and if the spread of policy uncertainty goes beyond US trading relationships, we get a sharper decline to 1.5%. That is, global merchandise trade volumes will contract by 1.5% if both of these risks materialize. So yes, I think that merchandise trade volume growth is not in a good place.
Right. So in this scenario, what can you do about it? Because the US has already basically scuppered the appeals process. It doesn't seem to want multilateral in any shape or form, and it begs the question what the WTO can do besides stand and watch.
Well, before we talk about that, Richard, I think the very big concern we have has to do with the decoupling of trade between China and the US, which we think is an even bigger problem. Because if you recall before, we had said that if we have this kind of decoupling and we have fragmentation of trade into two trading blocks, that this could really have a very big impact on the global economy, leading to a drop in real global GDP of up to 7% in the long term. This is a very big shock, and we don't want developing countries to become collateral damage in this kind of trade war, because we are projecting that if we have this decoupling with two trading blocks, we'll have double-digit welfare losses in many developing countries. So that's of great concern to us. At the yes, please.
Can I just jump in? Sorry, there's a terrible delay between me here in New York and you in Geneva. But are you forecasting now, do you think, a global recession? Do you think that is likely?
Look, all I can tell you, Richard, is that we are afraid of the impact on global growth of fragmentation, trade fragmentation. We think will have a very, very difficult impact on global growth. And I've mentioned the number of 7% real loss in global GDP in the longer term. So you can term it any term you like, but we are very clear that this is not something that would work for developing countries because they suffer even more. And you know, a large number of our members are also poorer countries. And that is why we're quite concerned about the China-US situation. So that is one of the things I'd really like to see. How do we avoid the risk of poor countries becoming collateral damage in the trade war?
What do you see as the future of the WTO? Clearly multilateral is just not going to happen. So what can you do, Director General, to try and in some shape or form keep global trade growing or getting it back onto track?
Well, I disagree with you about multilateral not happening. We have 166 members in the organization. US trade is 13% of world trade. That means that there's 87% of world trade happening between the other members of the WTO. And one of the things that has been so evident now is members coming to realize just how important the organization is for them and how much they want to protect the most favored nation terms of the WTO for the rest of the trade, 87% of world trade. And this is why, again, we come back to, look, we don't want fragmented trading blocks. We want our members to be able to trade freely. So at the WTO, members are talking to each other. They are reaching out. You've seen the EU reaching out to other members. You've seen New Zealand and others coming together to say, how do we protect and safeguard the rest of the system so that we can continue to trade? They've come to value the WTO more, if nothing else, because let me say one thing, Richard, it's not governments that trade, it is businesses. And businesses rely on the predictability and stability of WTO rules to trade. There are other agreements we have here, which if businesses don't have them, will create chaos. If you don't know how your goods are going to be valued, we have a customs valuation agreement. You don't know how your goods will be valued when they land in a destination because you're not part of the WTO. You can be subject to anything, and a business person doesn't want that kind of chaos. We provide stability.
So do you think that ultimately other nations will circumnavigate the US, and long term, whatever the ambition is to rewrite global trade that Donald Trump wants to do, ultimately the US is going to be the loser in the long run? Is that perhaps how it's seen in Geneva?
Let me tell you how it's seen. We do not ask nations to circumnavigate the US at all. The US, United States, is a member of the WTO. And what we're actually encouraging is that members have a good dialogue with the US. And this dialogue cannot be at the WTO because it's not only about tariffs. It's been made very clear by the US that they want to talk about other things beyond tariffs. It could be digital taxes and levies. It could be VAT. It could be other types of expenditures that are not within the terms of reference of the WTO. We have urged our members to have a good dialogue with the US, which is another member. And that's what we provide, a platform, and they're doing that. They will have bilateral dialogues. When they talk about tariffs, they will try to be WTO consistent in what they're doing. When they talk about other matters, security, defense spending, and so on, this is beyond the WTO. So they can't do it here. They have to do it with the US. But all of them are members. We respect all of them, and we want them to have a dialogue. We don't want circumnavigation of the US.
Director General Ngozi, I'm grateful to you. Thank you. We'll talk more. Thank you for joining us tonight.